Now that we have assessed the learner's writing and set appropriate language learning targets, how can we address these in the classroom? Let's recap what we finished with in the previous video. We have identified that the learner would need to work on the areas listed here on the left, to be able to combine sentences via using connectives and conjunctions, and also write meaningful and cohesive paragraphs, which means cohesive devices and connectives. In a minute, you will be asked to think about how you would support the learner towards these targets. Concretely, you will be prompted to think of at least one strategy per target that you could use. To help you with this task, you might wish to visit our Great Ideas pages and download and read our classroom guidance and strategies to support EAL learners document, both sources of lots of tried and tested EAL strategies, ideas, and approaches. Thank you for considering what strategies could work for the learner. Here are some ideas. First, let's look at how we could support the target B8 to do with combining sentences to produce paragraphs. Individual paragraphs need a number of sentences linked with connectives, conjunctions, and cohesive devices. For example, but, however, later, after that, and other. The descriptor also speaks of not just a paragraph, but paragraphs, meaning that the learner is also going to need to know how to connect paragraphs in addition to connecting sentences. So the learner is going to need to be able to use a number of connectives and other connecting devices. We could provide gap fill activities where learners need to insert connectives. These could be provided in the word box at the bottom of the sheet. We could also try and translate some into the learner's language, but we worry that such words do not always translate easily between languages. A good example is the English word and. Typically it translates as e into Polish, but on some occasions it becomes a in sentences when two things are compared. For example, what's the difference between a machine and a device translates as jaka jest różnica między maszyną a urządzeniem. We can also provide activities where learners are given two simple sentences and need to use a connective to link them into a longer one. For instance, based on the learner's writing, the two sentences could be she has blonde hair, she has a black dress, and the new sentence could then become she has blonde hair while her dress is black. While here emphasizes the contrast between blonde and black. And finally, an activity could be devised where learners need to find an error in sentences where connectives have been used incorrectly. For instance, I see a policeman, but there are people outside. Obviously, the idea is for the learner to improve the sentence by using the right connectives. All these activities are directed activities related to text, activities that focus learners' attention explicitly on an aspect of language, in this case, connectives. Another Dart activity, this time to do with the descriptor B9, as it's specific to writing paragraphs rather than connecting sentences, can be providing learners with jumbled up paragraphs of a text. That is, whole paragraphs rather than individual sentences within them, and asking them to sequence the paragraphs in the right order. It focuses their attention on there being paragraphs in a text. You can talk with the learner about why the paragraphs were introduced at a point in the text when they were and what purpose they serve. If the language barrier makes it difficult to explain certain concepts to the learner, you could either translate some words for them or ask the learner to look them up. These ideas are based on or come directly from our classroom guidance and strategies to support EAL learners document, as well as our Great Idea page on DARTs, directed activities related to text. You can read and download these by clicking the icons in the bottom of your screen now. Another strategy that could be used to teach connectives and cohesive devices is substitution tables. Learners choose one option from each column to create a number of sentences. The focus here, of course, is the connectives column, which relates to the target descriptor. These ideas, again, come directly from our classroom guidance and strategies to support EAL learners document and our great idea page, this time on substitution tables. You can read and download these by clicking the icons on your screen now. Don't forget that we can use AI to help us save time creating some of the activities. In this case, we are going to have a look if the generative artificial intelligence program ChatGPT can help us create some jumbled up activities for the learner. In this example, we are going to ask AI to create a text around John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men so that it is connected to the school curriculum. First, let's give ChatGPT a prompt, which is create a 6-paragraph piece of text not longer than 400 words for EAL learners at an early stage of English language proficiency, but not complete beginners. The text should be a summary of John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men. Please jumble up paragraphs so that they are not in the correct order. The result is this. As you can see, it sure is about Steinbeck's book, but we can immediately see that this would be a huge challenge for a learner on Band B because of the language requirements and complexity. Also, we asked for a summary, but the statements about the book's themes are not simply retellings of events in the book, which is what we were after. You will have noticed too that the paragraphs are not jumbled up at all, and the story is told as it occurs in the book. Let's give ChatGPT an additional prompt so that this initial output is improved. Our new prompt for ChatGPT is: remove more complex words so that the text is simpler and more accessible to learners who are still learning English. Remove any references to book themes and only include the events in the book themselves. Now you can see that the outcome is much better. The paragraphs are written in a more Band B language, so to speak, and the paragraphs are visibly shorter. The last paragraph, however, still includes a reference to the book theme. Additionally, if you look at paragraph 4, the last one on the left, the character of Curly's wife is mentioned, but this is unclear because nothing about Curly himself is mentioned before in the AI-generated summary. You might need to edit this for it to make logical sense. Now, as you can see, we are asking ChatGPT to jumble up the paragraphs. However, it's not what we get. ChatGPT does jumble sentences, but we can see that it's all now one long paragraph, not quite what we asked for. You would then need to go back to the previous step and edit the text there, jumbling up those paragraphs there yourself. So in this case, ChatGPT was helpful to an extent and definitely saved us some time, but we will need to complete the activity ourselves to make it what we want it to look like.